Good morning. I'm George DeLama, president of Eisenhower Fellowships, and we're delighted to be at Philadelphia's iconic City Hall with Mayor Sherelle Parker and so many other formidable women leaders. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for your gracious hospitality. We're immensely proud to have an Eisenhower Fellow leading this fine city. Thank you. And that's not all. Here in the audience, I just saw him, the managing director of the number 2, the former fire commissioner, another Eisenhower Fellow, Adam Thiel. There he is. And we have the former deputy mayor, Cynthia Figueroa, Eisenhower Fellow. The president of the Philadelphia Foundation, Pedro Ramos. Reggie Streeter, the president of Philadelphia School Board, Eisenhower Fellow. Do you guys have a secret handshake or what? This morning, we kick off Eisenhower Fellowship's dynamic new Women's Leadership Initiative, Igniting Young Women Leaders, and 2 days of exciting events marking our 2024 annual meeting. With Mayor Parker, one of our USA Fellows in 2010, we have the pleasure of welcoming today 2 distinguished trustees of Eisenhower Fellowships, our vice chair, former 2-term New Jersey governor, and later head of the Environmental Protection Agency, Christine Todd Whitman. And former U.S. Representative Jane Harman, a 9-term congresswoman from Los Angeles, who for years served as the ranking Democrat in U.S. national security circles, then went on to be president, later president emerita of the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington, and co-chair of Freedom House. We're thrilled that they could share with all the Eisenhower Fellows, young women, and other invited guests who've gathered here today their thoughtful insights about their experience as women leaders in American politics. There's some stories they could tell you, and the lessons they've learned along the way in their remarkable careers. Helping lead that conversation will be our Philly Fellow, Allison Young, managing partner of RWB Strategies, and herself a former senior White House official. Thank you, Allison. An emphasis on women's leadership is a core program dimension of Eisenhower Fellowships and that we've woven into everything we do. From our 3 fellowship programs dedicated to exceptional women leaders in 2010, 2015, and 2020, and a 4th one scheduled for this fall, to our dynamic women's leadership conferences over the last few years in New York, London, Miami, and Philadelphia. Eisenhower Fellowships dramatically has increased the representation of women in our programs, in our operations, and in our governance, as we've intensified our work to connect, empower, and mentor rising young female leaders coming along behind them. Today's event launches our EF Women's webinar series, part of an effort that will enlist the nearly 700 women Eisenhower Fellows in our network to mentor young women and girls around the world. I've been delighted to work closely on this initiative with Eisenhower Fellow Diane Melly, a former senior executive IBM who's now serving as a part-time advisor to me, and with our Vice President for Programs and Operations, Erin Hillman. This inaugural session with Mayor Parker, Governor Whitman, and Congresswoman Harman, in conversation with Allison, was Diane's excellent idea. But I'll let Diane tell you all about that and about the young women we've invited to be here with us today. A little later, we'll hear from Erin, who, among other things, was Mayor Parker's program officer back when the mayor was an Eisenhower Fellow we sent overseas. So thank you all again for being here. Now please welcome to the stage our colleague, our friend, Diane Melly.
Thank you, George. Today it is the inaugural session. I'm so excited. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here today as we launch this Igniting Future Leaders Conversation Series. Concept to launch in less than 6 months. Eisenhower Fellows make things happen. As George shared, Eisenhower Fellowships has a long history and commitment to advancing women's leadership around the world. In fact, the first women fellow was named in 1961, Pilar Villegas of Spain. In 2010, as you all know, we would go on to announce Sherelle Parker as a Philadelphia Fellow. And we all know where she's at now, right? Eisenhower Fellowships is a global network of dynamic change leaders committed to creating peaceful, prosperous, and a just world. While celebrating its 70th anniversary this year, there could not be a more relevant time for its vital mission and role in the world than the present. A very important aspect of Eisenhower Fellowships is sharing the knowledge gained during the fellowship program for the benefit of others when a fellow returns home. There's an expectation for fellows to engage with the organization, to advance our mission, and give back to the network throughout their entire lives. Today's conversations, as George said, is the first in a series that we will host with the goal of strengthening the Women's Leadership Network and inspiring a pipeline of future leaders, and maybe even future Eisenhower Women Fellows. Joining us today in the live audience, accompanied by several Eisenhower Fellows, are a cross-section of young women ages 18 to 24 from around the world and locally. I'm so excited to have them here. They're representing the African Genesis Institute, the Children's Scholarship Fund, Girls Spark, Juneteenth Philadelphia, LaSalle University, the Mainline Chamber Foundation, Mural Arts, Pew Charitable Trust, and the University of Pennsylvania. Give these young people a round of applause. These young women represent the future of women's leadership. Their lens and voices will help our current women fellows to identify areas that we can engage the power of the global network of over 700 women for real positive change. Coming up over the next year, we will host sessions on entrepreneurship, character and values, technology transforming professions, and keeping humanity in the arts, to name a few. Over the next few weeks, keep an eye on our website, www.efworld.org, for the full schedule. And I want to thank each of the Women Fellows who are behind the scenes putting this whole women's leadership program together and really dedicating and volunteering their time to really make the change that is needed. While we have these wonderful young people in the audience live today, we intend to make the content available to all fellows worldwide, to host watch parties to inspire young women tuning in from every corner of the planet. I have no doubt with this amazing panel that we will ignite the spark for women's leadership starting now. So please give a round of applause as we welcome Allison and our wonderful, prestigious panelists up to the stage.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Diane, George, and to the Eisenhower leadership and staff for having us all here. And to my fellow fellows, what a privilege it is to be part of this network. I'm so pleased to see so many of you. Now, I will tell you, Mayor Parker, we're going to start with you, because if there's one thing that I have learned in Philadelphia, it's that home field advantage really matters here. So Aaron and I were discussing last week your project in 2010, and I understand that you also traveled with Cynthia, our former deputy mayor, who's here. I wondered if we could start our conversation today, ladies, with a conversation about how women are ascending into political leadership. And I understand this was part of your study as well. So I would like to, I know that we have a lot to get to today, so I'm going to ask you to keep your answers brief. But that's our first question today, is let's talk about pathways for women into public service from your experience.
So just a quick 30 seconds. Welcome to the birthplace of democracy. Greatest city in the nation. Let me start by saying finding your purpose. Most of the women who I've ever encountered, and I really think about my mentors, two council members here from Philadelphia, Marion Tasco and Augusta Clark. Women who got engaged locally and figured out that we could use this thing called government as a tool to advocate for scarce resources to be appropriated in communities that usually been left out of the economic conversation. And I watched them. I was a student of their sort of pushing open doors and bringing folding chairs to tables that they weren't invited to participate in discussions, particularly involving the economics of our city. But they also let me know something extremely important that I'm hoping the young women who are here today get, and that is your own individual authentic voices matter. What you think matters. The critical thinking skills that you have, they matter. And so they let me know that my lived life experiences, I had something to contribute. And great mentors, they see things in you even when you don't see them in yourself. So I'm a benefit of
Yeah.
great mentorship.
Governor Whitman, would you like to answer this question?
Oh, certainly. I mean, first of all, I agree with everything the mayor said, because I think it's so important.
Can you pick up your mic a little? Thank you.
Is that-
There we go. Okay.
I do agree with everything she said, because it is so important to understand that you have something to give, and that to make true change that will stand the test of time, you need people with different life experiences, different ways of problem solving at the decision-making table, because then you get the kind of outcomes that really last. And I can think of one particular woman I had in my cabinet who is a prime example. I asked her to come into the cabinet, be head of policy and planning, and she said, well, I can't do that. I said, yes, you can. You're very bright. You can do this. So she did it. She was very good. And then I said, all right, I'd like you to be Commissioner of Community Affairs. Well, you would have thought I'd asked her to go to the moon without a rocket ship. And she said, I can't do that. And I said, yes, you can. And she was an extremely effective commissioner. And then when I went to the Environmental Protection Agency, I said, you're perfect for Region 2. Again, I mean, absolutely no way she could do this. And turned out to be one of the better, I mean, the staff, the career staff at EPA Region 2 really, really liked the job she did. And of course, that was during a very difficult time, shall we say, 9/11 and a bunch of other things. But she did an outstanding job. And that's the problem. Women tend to always think, when you're offered a position, you think, well, I know there's somebody who knows more about that than I do. And I'm sure there's somebody who's better at it than I am. And we've got to stop that and say, we can learn on the job as well as anybody. And with all due respect to the men here, what usually happens, if you ask a man to do something outside of their wheelhouse, they'll say, sure, bring it on, even though they might not know a thing about it. We've got to get better at doing that, because as the mayor said, life experience makes a difference. Yes. And take advantage of that and understand it, and then believe in it and believe in yourself. And you've also got to know why you want to do the job. Congresswoman?
Congresswoman.
So I'm delighted to be here, but I'm looking around the walls of this room.
Yeah.
What is wrong with this picture? Where are the women? I can't find one woman. And is there one that I'm not seeing?
No.
She's right there.
Yeah.
All right, so. You know, as someone who goes back a few decades in politics, life, a very proud grandmother, by the way, I grew up at a time when there were no women on the walls. And I went literally to the Democratic Convention in Los Angeles in 1960. I was young then, don't think I was this age. But I saw the nomination of John Kennedy, which was an inspirational moment for me. But I also met Eleanor Roosevelt. No kidding. This old woman with this aura around her. And I saw that and I thought, look at how much power she has. That is so impressive. And it took me a long time, 37 years, to run for Congress and be elected. But I'm just saying that don't think small. If you want to do something, you can do it. I did not come from a political family. Both parents were immigrants, and I made my way into politics, and I had a lot of political jobs before Congress and a lot of interesting things since Congress. And I look for the day when lots of women will be on these walls and every wall, because we are a majority of the population, a majority of the talent pool, and if we don't serve, how are things going to improve?
Congressman, I want to thank you for giving us what will become the title of the book on this series, More Women on the Walls. So thank you for that. But I also wonder, most of your experiences in the intelligence community, in the international community, with our Eisenhower group here today, I'm wondering if you might reflect on some examples of women leading the way around the world that you would recommend to us.
I just got back from El Salvador with the World Food Program US, and it was just amazing to see what was happening in the villages in El Salvador when they were given a chance to learn how to grow organically, to create co-ops, to do things. I mean, it's been proven throughout the world. If you give a microloan to a woman, it gets invested in the community. If you give it to a man, who knows where it goes. But what this was, to see these women saying, I never thought I could do this. And now they'd set up bank accounts, they'd set up a co-op. And a number of the women said, before this, we were ignored and we were psychologically and sometimes physically abused. Now our children look up to us. Now we are creating a path that they can see a future. And they want to stay home. They want to stay in El Salvador. They don't want to move, but they need options to be able to support their families. And they're out there doing it. And as one of the women said, and I'm kicking my husband off the couch.
Sure. Do you want to jump in on this one, on women leading the way around the world?
Well, the sad truth is women have led many countries in the world. Some have led them well, some have led them less well. What about us? How is it possible that the United States has not yet elected a woman president? And when you look at the landscape, there are very many qualified women out there. I mean, and they're not all grandmas. Lots of younger women who have proved that they can be very good mayors and good governors and
good congressional leaders.
Yes.
But for example, the mayor of my city, Los Angeles, happens to be a woman, Karen Bass, who grew up as a social worker, became the first woman. Why does everyone have to be the first? Why can't we be the 100th? I mean, why isn't there more? Speaker of the California Assembly, served in Congress for 5 terms, was the head of the Congressional Black Caucus, which was not an easy job, and then decided and was considered for vice president with Joe Biden. She was my candidate, full confession. But then went back to LA to run for mayor and was elected and is very competent. And nobody should second guess the fact that women, Christy said it too, lead very well. My observation is women lead very well in legislative bodies, because most of us have grown up as problem solvers in our households. Some men don't bother with that, just saying. And solving problems is what women do well. And if you're in a legislature and there are big problems, spoiler alert, there are very big problems in Congress right now, you have some skill sets to make that work. So to all you young women out there, don't opt out. No excuses. I see you nodding. You can all do this. If we could do this, you can do this. Good for Eisenhower fellows for having this group here and having this event here. Great.
I too would affirm that when we think globally, but for me, right here in the United States, when I think about major cities and the number of mayors, Congresswoman, I would agree. I think about Karen Bass. I think about San Francisco, Mayor London Breed. I think about major cities where we are facing great challenges. I do not think it is a coincidence that after men have led in these areas for so long, and we have so many seemingly intractable problems, that these women come along. And sometimes we unfairly do this to ourselves because, Congresswoman and Governor, I agree with you. I feel like I've been a fixer since I was a little girl. I was very good at fixing problems at home, and learned from my grandmother and the matriarchs in my family. And so for me, I acknowledge that women have the uncanny ability to fix seemingly intractable and complex challenges. But it is also important that we understand that representation does matter. And so you can't be what you don't see. So when girls across the nation saw Kamala Harris, elected vice president of the United States of America. To me, I didn't view her as sort of, smashing glass ceilings. I often told people, I don't want to get cut. The glass ceilings are nice, but I'm much more concerned with how these women lay concrete pavers for the next generation to walk on and through the doors so that we never become the first of anything again. And that is the example that I am hoping that the young women who are present here today, that you really do believe it, because sometimes we are our own worst critics. Philadelphians who are in the room, Governor, and just for the record, I am fangirling up here right now with Governor Whitman and the Congresswoman, but we so easily allow other people to throw shade on our shine. When we do something really well, and we can know that we do it well, 99% of the people in the audience can say, Governor, you did an amazing job in New Jersey. And we'll think about that 1% that says that we agree to disagree with the job you've done, and then we allow them and or it to occupy space in our minds. Connie Williams is here, very successful former state senator who helped us create CHIP here in the Commonwealth. Complex issues, a lot of criticism, but learning to push through, and don't allow people to so easily throw shade on your shine, your success.
Well said. It's a perfect segue into this question of, there's all of your experience reflect that it's hard to get there. But once you're there, women there's a lot of research on how women are more effective communicators, strategic thinkers, problem solvers, as you've mentioned. So once you're there, you're more effective. My question, beyond the criticism, are there advantages to being a woman once you're there? Do people assume a generosity of heart or spirit that makes your positionality in these rooms an advantage?
Let me start here. I remember being sworn in on January the 2nd, and I remember people, my family, being very excited about this history-making opportunity like that, to have a woman on the wall right in the room. But I remember walking into that office and sitting down alone and saying to myself, you are very vulnerable right now. You have to make sure that you select the best and the brightest to help you implement this bold vision that you have for the city. By the way, we want to make it the safest, cleanest, greenest big city in the nation with economic opportunity for all. And I learned that I couldn't do it alone. And some folks said, don't say that out loud, because you are a woman and you will appear to be weak and vulnerable. But I'm glad I did not do a lot of listening to Washington insiders. In every community that I've gone in, I've affirmed to the public that I am your mayor. first woman mayor, 100th mayor, first woman in 341 years, but it means absolutely nothing if we don't have the team of people who are here to help us implement that vision. And men and women both come up and they say, thank you for acknowledging that you are vulnerable. So there is strength in affirming, and I don't know that men do this really well, I don't mean to be biased, but affirming that you don't know it all, that you can't do it all alone. And what I've noticed is that people are more than willing to volunteer their talents and their gifts to come and work with you to help implement a vision. And so for me, I think people, even in Harrisburg, I am a Black Democratic woman from a large urban city. I served for 10 years in a Pennsylvania House. My greatest work, and this is going to shock some people, was performed with a presiding Republican governor, Tom Corbett, a Republican-controlled House, a Republican-controlled Senate, and I had to deliver for our city. I learned how to, GTY is what we call it, get to yes. If you haven't read it, please do. But we were able to realize that these were people who I would agree to disagree with on a number of issues, but we had to figure out how to get to yes. And I think there is no greater group better at learning how to compromise and get things done than women.
All set.
So again, because I'm the dinosaur here, or a co-dinosaur of a few of you, a co-dinosaur, I always get asked, what was it like being the only woman in the room? What was it like being the first woman in the room? And my answer to that may surprise some of you. My answer, it was and is, I didn't think about it that way. Yes. I thought, I'm in this room. I got here the same way everybody else did. And my opportunity is to be excellent. And if I'm excellent, I will advance. And if somebody, I never played the grievance card. It's easy to play, let me just say, because some people are pretty snarky and unfair. But I just kept on going, and something I learned along the way, I'm sure we've all experienced it, and so have all of you, is you got to learn how to take a punch. Yes. There are people out there, fair or unfair, who are going to try that. And some of them, dirty little secret, are women who are resentful that you're there and they're not. But so what? You're there. Make the most of it. And I think that has certainly worked for me, and I promise you it'll work for you.
My experience, actually,
That was powerful. That was powerful.
is actually very much like yours in the sense that I get asked the question, what was it like being the first woman governor? And I answer, is it on now?
Yeah.
Somebody else is controlling it, not me, I promise. What was it like being the first woman governor? And I answer, and I always say, I'm not trying to be flip, but I have no idea. I know I'm a governor. I face the things that other governors face, and it's hard to pick out. If you spend time picking out the little things that they do and say, I mean, sure, there were the ones that reported on my clothes and, what I wore and that kind of stuff. You just don't pay any attention to it. That's their problem, not mine. And that will be your problem, not your problem. It's their problem. That's the way to look at it. If they're just coming at you because you're a woman, well, too bad for them. And one of the things I found to go along with what the mayor was saying is that I grew up in horse country on a farm, and I grew up riding, and so I use this analogy. I'd always rather have a horse I had to rein in than one I had to kick. And so when I was looking for a cabinet, I wanted people that had big ideas, that I would give them where I wanted to go, where my vision was, what I saw that I wanted to accomplish. But I wanted to get people to, okay, tell me, am I crazy? And if I'm not crazy, then let's get it done. How do we get it done? And if they said there were problems and I didn't disagree with why they didn't want to do it, I said, just do it. I learned it actually early on when I was a county commissioner. We called them freeholders in those days, and I was put in charge of overseeing the construction of a jail, of a courthouse. I had no idea how to build a courthouse. And the very first meeting I had with the labor unions that were going to be on the job, and they all looked at me and said, yeah, what's this 20-something year old woman's going to do to us? And I said, look, I have no idea how to build a courthouse, but I know what we need in the courthouse. And I had a very quirky judge who was quite short, and he wanted a bench that was 3 steps higher, 4 steps higher than everybody. But anyway, and, understandably. And I said, but you know how to do it, I know what we need, and I sign the checks. That was all it took. We brought the building in on time and under budget. But it was acknowledging that I don't know everything, and you are the experts, and so you tell me how to do it, but I'm telling you what we have to have in it. And it's the same way with the people who you get to work with you in a cabinet, is you want them, they've got to buy into your vision, but then they've got to be smarter than you.
Could I have one thing to that, and that is that I think being a mayor and a governor at the moment is a much better job than being a member of Congress.
Oh,
Just
without
like I say.
question.
But I actually left Congress to run for governor of California in the late 90s, and I lost. But on the way, I would be asked questions about things I didn't know about, and I would say, I don't know the answer to that, but I will learn about it. After I lost, a woman came up to me and she said, "You blew it." And I said, "Well, I clearly blew it. I lost." but she said, "You never should say, I don't know. Men don't do that." And think about it. We've already had this conversation in part. Men will do anything, try anything. Not all men, but many men will do that. Many women will say, "That's too hard. I can't," and opt out. And I feel good about the fact that I said, even though I lost, a woman did not win. But I don't know the answer to a lot of things. And just what Christy was saying, you figure it out and you learn from smarter people than you. And hiring people who are smarter than you is exactly the right way to go. That story about the horse is right. You don't want to kick the horse. You want the horse to be to lead. And it has always worked, and it will work for you. And a lot of them are women. So much the better.
I think that vulnerability that the mayor mentioned makes you relatable as well, right? So, yeah. I want to follow up the conversation about taking a punch, because my experience in public service has been that things are getting nastier, and I think we all acknowledge that. And so the punches are coming faster and from a lot of different places. I'm curious, your experience, the three of you, about where we were in public service maybe 25 years ago to where we are now, and the criticisms. Did you get more grace 25 years ago than maybe the mayor is getting now? What's the difference?
Do you want to start, since you keep insisting you're the oldest?
She's saying, we'll fight this out later. But anyway.
It's a question about politics in our time right now.
I was a staffer in the United States Senate many years ago, and at a time when there were very few women staffers. That wasn't how I thought about it, but it was the case. And what was very good about the Senate then was people lived in Washington full-time. That doesn't happen anymore. Their kids were on the same Little League team on the weekends, went to the same schools, and some of them even roomed together or lived in the same apartment building, and they really knew each other. And the Senate worked in those days. There were lots of big issues. They weren't all resolved easily, but it was a completely different time. Segue to when I was elected to the House in 1992, in another century. It still worked, and my year was the so-called Year of the Woman. The Year of the Woman, when the number of women in the House doubled. And when 2 senators from my state, Feinstein and Boxer, were elected at the same time. Oh my God, 2 senators, and what would happen to California? Actually, a cartoonist drew the state of California, picture what it looks like with a high heel on the bottom half. And I thought that was the coolest, absolutely coolest. But then, 2 years later, when I barely won in a lean Republican seat, which was the seat I represented, Newt Gingrich came to power. I'm not trying to shame Newt Gingrich, but he
Go for it.
changed the course. I have 2 things to say about this. 2 things, go for it. there was something called the Contract with America, which some of us called the Contract on America. And I remember calling one of my youngest daughter one night, because Congress met until midnight to pass this thing. And I said, honey, I can't come home and put you to bed because I have to stay late and vote on unfunded mandates. Don't ask why I said such a crazy thing. She said, Mommy, she was probably 8, why is voting on unfunded mandates more important than coming home and putting me to bed? And people, if you can answer that question, I've never been able to answer it. But the other thing I wanted to tell you, and it relates to Newt Gingrich, is after I was out of Congress and he was out of Congress, he came around to the Wilson Center. He was doing some research on Congress. And I said, Newt, why did you make the place so partisan? I finally could ask him that. And he said, because I wanted to keep my power. And boo. I mean, that's where we have come, certainly in Congress. It's much more about getting reelected and keeping power than it is about putting the country first. And I've lived this experience, and it is a tragedy for our country that so many people in both parties, don't want to shock you, but there are Democrats who do this too, think getting reelected is more important than solving the problems for the country, which would mean working with some Republicans. There are lots of good people in both parties, and being bipartisan. If you are bipartisan in Congress, you're going to be primaried, and you could easily lose because both parties push to their more extreme voters in primaries.
The other big difference, it's gotten very personal.
Yeah.
Now you don't just disagree with someone, or when you do disagree with them, you hate them. They are the enemy, rather than they're someone with whom you disagree. I mean, that happens all the time, but not today. And it gets nasty. And there are a lot of really good people who want to run for office or who are in office and leaving office because they just don't want to put their families through it. And right here in Philadelphia, Seth Bluestein, the council member, he's a forwardist, the new party that Andrew Yang and I co-chair or co-founded along with someone else. That's for another discussion, unless you let me into it, which I will go forever on it because I think it's necessary. But anyway, he was subjected after the 2020 election to brutal attacks, anti-Semitic. They went after his family. They were on his lawn. I mean, he stayed the course, and he refused to change the vote in favor of Trump. He was a Republican. He was getting all this pressure. He refused to do it. And God bless him, he's running again. But there are too many of them now because it's gotten so personal, and because, unfortunately, the previous Republican president has made behavior that was maybe always in the background. It's made it acceptable to call people names, to denigrate someone because of a handicap or their religion, and to act out on that. I mean, he's encouraged it, and that's made things much worse and much more problematic for those in office. I mean, I think we all had problems, and we all had people who threatened, but never like this, and never this seriously. I don't remember I got death threats, but they were mostly nutcases that you didn't bother about. But now it's serious. And I do blame Newt Gingrich for that, because the other thing he did, it used to be in Congress that the freshmen would come in and they'd all do orientation together. He's the one who separated that. He said, no, Republicans are going to do their own, Democrats are going to do their own. And that meant they never got to know each other again because of their Tuesday to Thursday and leaving fast, and his discouraging this kind of cross-party reaching, I don't say compromise, consensus. And it's gotten much worse. So I don't know how it's playing out for you now, but it would be different.
I would argue that I agree with the Congresswoman and the governor. Taking a punch is a part of politics, and growing up in it, you learn it. When I was in Harrisburg, and I want to go back to the issue of partisanship, I could agree to disagree with my Republican colleagues on guns, on choice, and on some other matters. But this idea of compromise, it was not viewed as something dirty. Now, if you say the C word, compromise, you are absolutely right. You are in jeopardy of losing your seat. I would also argue this. The difference between taking a punch and how you respond and how the electorate responds is different now because of this amazing technological tool called social media. and that now facts, because I'm a certified secondary English teacher. I am trained to write. I am trained to debate. I am trained to engage. But when fact checking and truth is not a part of the argument being made to determine whether or not you deserve the punch or you don't deserve the punch, that becomes a challenge. So when we were, accustomed to being able to have journalists who are the role of the journalists and newspapers that are writing and fact checking, it has not, ever been as important as it is today, because no matter the message, you can go straight to the electorate and say, don't believe what you just saw. This is not what it seems to be. And now, because of the freedom of the media, that kind of campaign is believable. And the grace and dignity that was offered when we were taking a punch, now it's different. Now, the personalities, I will also say to you that I do believe that one of the former, because I won't say the name, I do think that people have now become emboldened to say out loud and be proud of those things. Not that they agree to simply disagree with us about, but the more salacious and mean-spirited and vicious that it is, there is a constituency that will lift you higher. Now, for the three of us who, despite our parties, I think we've been on the right side of, sort of taking a punch and or throwing one every now and again. The difference is we have to let the work speak for itself and not allow the noise to drown out whatever our perspective is. I use this as an example, and this is important. There was a movement that took place across the nation, and under the guise of the movement, it was during civil unrest with the heinous murder that we saw of George Floyd, and there were people who were literally calling for us to defund the police. Now, there were some people who I understood what they meant. They didn't literally mean that they wanted to defund the police. They were talking about making investments in areas that had not been invested in. But there was a constituency who meant exactly what they said, and they were loud, and their microphones were elevated across the nation. And I just had to stand up and say, wait a minute, I'm what Tasco would say, don't tiptoe through the tulips. Tell them what you're really thinking. People in my community don't want us to defund the police. They want zero tolerance for any misuse or abuse of authority by law enforcement, but they want you to protect and serve the communities that are throughout our city. Governor and Congresswoman, I can remember the day I said it out loud during the mayoral election. My campaign folks, they're not here today, but they looked at me, they were like, it's over. Guess what people yearned for? And even with the ugliness, guess what they're yearning for? They're yearning for authenticity. They're yearning for you to be yourself. They're yearning to hear those elected to public office say, I'm not perfect. We're not perfect. I'm going to do the best I can with my real lived life experience, my academic preparation, and my professional acumen to deliver on what I've committed to you. But we've been told so long that that's not enough. Women have to know that it is enough, and people want to see your humanness. Don't run from yourself. It's all right.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to transition to a time of audience questions. So if the staff could come forward with the microphones. And while they're making their way forward, Mayor, I wonder if you might just follow that with one question that the governor teed up, and that is, you've been taking some big swings, just in a couple of months since you've been inaugurated. Has the criticism been personal, or has it been about the policy for you?
It's been both, but I will tell you, and I want to give you an example. We have what I consider to be a humanitarian crisis here in the city of Philadelphia, sort of like a perfect storm, a hurricane of mental and behavioral health challenges, substance use disorder, and/or addiction, people who are unhoused, homeless, all concentrated into a particular community in our city. And it has taken decades and decades and decades for it to become as bad as it is. And I decided on the campaign trail that I would publicly affirm, particularly because I know what it's like to love someone who has suffered from addiction. But I believe that they can get through it, and you can win with long-term care, treatment, and housing. Well, that's in opposition to a constituency that has been accustomed to us, from my humble opinion, putting a Band-Aid and using one particular strategy to address what deserves a comprehensive response. So I decided that we would develop a plan to end an encampment that was on that large stretch of that commercial quarter, where children can't walk to school without stepping on needles or go play in the nearby park. There were flyers. And someone shared this with my son, Langston, who is 11. He'll be 12 years old this year. There were flyers posted on poles that said, if you use drugs, Mayor Sherelle Parker wants you to die. She's trying to kill you. Not just to me, but the person who is the council person for that area. A weaker person would say, I need to abandon my frame of thinking because I'm human. It doesn't feel good, but I'll tell you what it does. Well, when you come from humble beginnings and you're raised by a grandmother like the one I had, it further strengthens your resolve. Like if you thought I was pissed off about it then, like I'm really digging in my heels now. And so you're right, I'm human.
Yeah.
It hurt. But you can, no matter how loud the noise, and even if you lose, it's the risk, Congresswoman, when she's talking with the guys are willing to take a risk. Some of us are so afraid to fail. You have to be willing to take a risk. And that's
Thank you.
what I want.
Thank you
I
for
just
stepping
want to
into the
add-
breach.
Can I add something? I just wanted to add something to that because I think you're absolutely right that people are yearning for someone who is going to say, this is who I am, and you're not going to agree with me on everything, but you'll know how I'm approaching these issues because this is how I think, this is how I believe in solving problems, and that is going to mean more than those who follow a straight party line and don't think for themselves. I really think it's critically important that we start recognizing that and stop being so afraid, particularly as you mentioned, Jane, getting knocked out of office. This idea that you have to have power, it's all about the office and not about solving people's problems. Everything's looked at through the partisan political prism now, not through the policy prism, and it's all about the next election. And people are so afraid of losing that seat that they won't say what they honestly believe. They try to be what they think they should be in order to get their base out. And that's where we've really lost it. And I believe the majority of the people will, in fact, look for and want to see someone who is a genuine person who comes up and says, you're not going to agree with me all the time, but here's what I believe.
That's right.
Why I believe it, and I hope you'll agree with me.
Let me underscore what the mayor said, too, about authenticity. It matters more than anything. It really does. And I would often say, I'm going to listen, and then I'm going to lead. And I'll explain why I'm voting to ban assault weapons, which was a very hard vote. And I'm going to explain why I voted against the Homophobic Defense of Marriage Act, which was a really hard vote in my district. And I'm going to explain why I'm voting for what was then the Clinton budget, which raised taxes and cut spending and put us on a path to a balanced budget, which I still think was a very good move, which passed on a bipartisan basis back in the day, and which we need to get back to. But my point is, I never lost for being me. I never did. I mean, some people disagreed with me, but people respected me, and they will respect you for being yourself. Know what you believe in. You have to know what you believe in. And then you'll have these campaign advisors who say, oh, no, it's too risky. You can't do that. Oh, my God. Oh, no. Like the one you had. You're dead. But you're the one in the hot seat. And it took a heck of a lot to get there. And so take the heat. You'll benefit from it.
Thank you.
So on behalf of Eisenhower Fellowships, I want to thank our moderator, Allison Young, Congresswoman Jane Harman, Governor Whitman, and Mayor Parker. I wanted to extend a special thank you to Mayor Parker for welcoming Eisenhower Fellowships into the People's House. We have a little housewarming gift for you to help you remember your 2010 Eisenhower Fellow, a photo with you and the late General Powell, our chairman of Eisenhower Fellowships. And with former President of Chile, Michelle Bachelet, who Sherelle has met on her fellowship. I think for all of us, it gives us a memory of what's possible in the future for all of you. So I want to thank all of you. And just in terms of housekeeping notes, tonight at 5:30 p.m., for those of you who are registered, we'll meet at the Masonic Temple for our session. And I also want to thank Lori Jones, EF trustee and fellow, for sponsoring the refreshments that are still available next door. Thank you, everyone. We're so inspired by today's session. Thank you so much.